headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
Good morning, happy Christmas, and welcome again to Today with Tom Harwood and Olivia Utley. We're in for Bev Turner here on GB News. So here's what's coming up today on the programme.
Rishi Sunak has been warned by ex-Prime Minister Theresa May not to water down modern slavery laws to make it harder to claim asylum in the UK. But with the number of cross-channel migrants hitting nearly 46,000, should the PM stick to his plan?
Meanwhile, the Met Office has issued stark weather warnings for the month ahead, with predictions that it could be the snowiest January for 12 years. This all, of course, comes as at least 57 people have died in the States after a huge snowstorm has plunged the country into chaos.
Award-winning chef and restaurateur Aldo Zilli will be cooking up a storm in the studio, showing you what you can do with all those Christmas leftovers.
And of course, the show is nothing without you and your views. So get in touch. Email in gbviews@gbnews.uk. That's the address to talk about any of the subjects we're talking about today. Or you can tweet us at GB News to have your say.
Has been warned by ex-Prime Minister Theresa May not to water down modern slavery laws to make it harder to claim asylum in the UK. The number of migrants crossing the Channel has reached a staggering 46,000 over the last year. Solving the migrant crisis could be key to winning the next general election, which is fast approaching.
Meanwhile, the last 12 months have been a political rollercoaster, to say the least. From Partygate to Beergate, with all those within UK politics not shying away from a scandal.
Plus, 4 chancellors and 3 prime ministers sounds like a verse of the 12 Days of Christmas. So let's deep dive into the political year that is 2022.
Do you remember, I think it was Angela Eagle who stood up at the last Prime Minister's Questions of the Year and listed off in sort of the way in which the 12 Days of Christmas goes. And I think she started from about 6 and got all the way down to 1.
Yeah, we should look
up
on a
exactly
plate, really, isn't it?
Yeah,
but it was fantastic.
It's less about Angela Eagle and more about the whole year as it happened. I'm delighted to be joined by the former Labour MP, Stephen Pound. Stephen, thank you for being with us. Happy Christmas.
And to you. Wishing you a year, on the one hand, rather more peaceful, but on the other hand, what a year to be one of the prominent investigative journalists of the nation. What a year to be in the media. What a year to be shining the spotlight, the sun, the disinfectant sunlight on the sordid goings-on of politics. It's been a fairly busy year for you lot.
Yeah, and it has been fairly sordid goings-on across the board. I suppose it's not the chirpiest thing to start off with, but one of the big themes of this year, in Westminster at least, was, of course, the number of sex scandals there were. Impropriety amongst members of the House of Commons, people watching illicit material on those benches, members of Parliament even being cautioned by the police. Is the culture of Westminster just fundamentally broken?
Well, I wouldn't say it was entirely broken, but certainly it's badly damaged. And I must admit, I would never look at pictures of tractors again in the same light. But I mean, when I was first elected, Linda McDougall, the journalist, interviewed myself and my wife, and she said to my wife, "Are you not worried about Stephen? There might be a spot of extracurricular going on." And so Maggie looked and she said, "Well, with a face like his, I think that's slightly unlikely." And Linda McDougall said, "No, shut up. This is serious." She said, "No. Even Stephen could end up being dragged into some one of these occasions." Anyway, fortunately, that situation didn't arise, but for fairly obvious reasons. But no, it is. I mean, the real problem about this is the fact that our reputation collectively as MPs has gone from being sort of ignored to being laughed at. And I think in politics you can survive being hated, you can survive being loathed, and obviously you'd like to be loved. But what you can't stand is being laughed at and being an object of scorn and ridicule. And that's really what people, without mentioning their names, they've suffered enough. But these people who did these ridiculous things, they really have dragged us even deeper into the gutter, into the Stygian sludge, the mephitic, ghastly, hellish world that we seem to be occupying at the present time.
Mephitic. It's a great one.
New one for us. I think it does feel a little bit as though, because we've had all these scandals and such a sort of torrid year, that in the last couple of months things have gone quiet. Politicians seem pretty happy with that. Rishi Sunak just seems to be talking about, phasing things off. It's a bit of a rhetoric of managed decline. Is there an opportunity in 2023 for politicians to sort of seize the narrative again and actually do something positive? Or is their reputation just so deeply in the mud that we've reached a bit of an impasse?
Well, no, you can do it. I mean, the interesting thing about the joys of boredom, the absolute delights of tedium, is that it's the contrast to what comes before. I mean, after Churchill, he was very flamboyant, and after all, Churchill was very much in the mire in the 1930s. But he came back, and what brought him back into prominence was a national crisis. After him, you then got the managerialism of Clement Attlee, who was basically Keir Starmer, but with rather less hair, and but he was a managerialist. After Trump, who's probably the ultimate populist over the top, and you got the sort of the calm Joe Biden. And I think that the reality is that people will now look for something completely different. And I think in some ways, Rishi Sunak is playing quite a clever game. Being boring is something which may not, actually be particularly exciting at home, but I think it's what the nation wants. However, to get to your main point, if something absolutely dreadful happens, and when you think of how much awful stuff that has happened, imagine if China invades Taiwan. Imagine what that does to supply chains. Imagine what that does to global security. If that happens, then politicians will be tested. And don't forget, steel becomes stronger the more it's hammered, or iron becomes stronger. And I think if we had a crisis of that nature, then cometh the hour, maybe cometh the person. But at the moment, it's steady as she goes. It's a sort of the Stanley Baldwin as opposed to Ramsay MacDonald line. And I can see the attraction of that. But, as was rightly and very, very precipitately said a few moments ago, the election's getting closer. It's not quite 2 years away. So who knows what horrors are coming over the hill.
I think that particular description of the pendulum of British politics, from the sort of more jocular characters to the more nerd-like characters, as you were speaking, Stephen Pound, I made a list, and I think it works absolutely spot on. Churchill, big, jocular. Attlee, small, nerdy. Back to Churchill, big again. Eden, perhaps more nerdy, I suppose. Macmillan, Super Mac, as he was known, a big character. Douglas Hume, very, very, I don't know, sort of bookish. And then, of course, Wilson was a huge figure with a pipe and all the rest of it, Churchillian, if you will. Heath, he played the piano. He was unmarried. I mean, all of this stuff. And then back to Wilson. Callaghan, again, a nerd. Thatcher, the ultimate jock. Major, a nerd. Blair, a jock. And then Brown, a much more nerdy figure. Cameron to May to Boris. It works. It just works.
It works,
right?
But then Starmer, he's definitely a nerd. What happens next?
But then, clearly, I think Liz Truss was a nerd. And I think Rishi Sunak is a nerd as well. So I think we've broken it. This year has broken that pendulum that has been working since the Second World War.
On that theory, I mean, it'll be Angela Rayner as the next. But it doesn't actually work because, I mean, I think we have to discount Liz Truss pretty much as the nation discounted Liz Truss. I'm not entirely sure that 44 actually, makes the equation inoperable, but the rest of it is absolutely. And I hadn't thought about Anthony Eden. Anthony Eden, they said he was the best advertisement the 30-shilling tailor ever had. He's a chap who used to wear a Homburg hat and is a great fashion. I mean, listen, it's all right for you youngsters. I was there, and so the contrast did go from him to Macmillan, who came out with these great lines, speaking as one crofter to another, and so you did have that. It also works in America if you actually think about it with. Reagan, Bush, Clinton. You know, you can actually see the.
There is that sort of people want sort of, sometimes everything gets too boring, then they want big excitement, then they want it back to boringness again. Perhaps next year might be a little bit more boring than this one. But Stephen Pound, thank you so much for that rip-roaring roller coaster through British political history. And cheers. Well,
listen, come on, seriously.
Oh no, sorry Stephen, we have run out of time there because we do need to bring in, he's been waiting patiently for us. Marco Longhi, the Conservative MP, has joined us. Now there we go, Marco, do you agree with what we were talking to Stephen Pound about there, that this year has been rather too exciting, that perhaps it's time for a bit of calm?
I think I do, but only to some extent. And I think I'd like us to all feel a little bit more positive about the future here. I mean, this is a fantastic democracy that we live in, and it's what we would call a representative democracy. And if only, say, 2% of the population got up to no good, well, 2% of all politicians, that makes 13 MPs who might get up to no good. And of course, they're under much more of a spotlight because of their own role in the media. So is it any surprise, really, that there are some people that do no good when they're in Parliament? What I would like to emphasise, though, is that there are a great number of MPs that do some great stuff, particularly in their constituencies, and that's really never spoken about. And I do think that we've got a better future ahead of us. So let's look at 2023 with a spirit of optimism and good cheer.
Of course, the biggest crisis probably facing Rishi Sunak in 2023, not very cheery, is the immigration crisis. And you wrote in the Telegraph a few weeks ago, actually, suggesting that perhaps there might not be the political will there to address that. Do you think that Rishi Sunak can get a grip on it? Do you think he really wants to get a grip on it next year?
Well, I think that one of the standout aspects of Rishi's premiership so far is one of he wants to send out a message of competence and sticking to decisions. So it was very positive for me when he finally gave the nod to the Cumbrian mine, which made every sense to put into production, something that I don't think would have happened under other premierships. So he's stuck to that. And certainly through the whipping office, I'm seeing a different operation now. And I think that if he does stick to what he has promised, which is to solve illegal immigration, then I think the Conservative Party will be regaining position in the polls as it rightly should. This was a manifesto pledge that we made, and it's something that the whole of the population will hold us to account of if we don't deliver. It's very simple.
Yeah. But I suppose the problem is that Rishi Sunak's got his 5-point plan for immigration, which has been accepted and actually welcomed by most of the Conservative Party. But there are still some of those barriers there. And of course, there are plenty of MPs who are now saying that the big issue is the European Court of Human Rights. And without getting out of the European Court of Human Rights, it might be just impossible to get anywhere. You've got this great 5-point plan in place, but you'll have human rights lawyers after human rights lawyers just thwarting what the government's trying to do. Do you think leaving the ECHR in 2023 is something we should now really be considering?
Absolutely. I've been writing about that, and I've been talking about leaving the ECHR for probably over 2 years now. This is when former Home Secretary Priti Patel was in position, because I could see that initiative after initiative after initiative was being scuppered by these woke lefty lawyers who just were invoking ECHR rules and regulations, doing the bidding of judges based in Strasbourg and Brussels, and really that was a smack in the face to everybody who voted for Brexit. Either we're a sovereign nation or we're not. Now, we can have a perfectly gold-plated, first-class bill of human rights that replaces the ECHR, but that we remove with a laser-like focus those aspects that are being abused by these lawyers that's scuppering our system. So, you have a scenario in which Germany, which subscribes to the ECHR, they don't let in any Albanians at all. And we've let in 55% on the basis of some of these rules and regulations, which makes a complete mockery of our own system. Clearly, the system is being abused. And if we don't sort it out, we will be held accountable on polling day.
But to zoom out now to the comparisons that are inevitably drawn between the Conservative Party and His Majesty's loyal opposition, the Labour Party, Is there that much difference now between these two parties? I was listening to Rishi Sunak's big announcement on illegal migration, which mainly focused on fast-tracking those claims of those from safe countries, more processing workers to go through those claims, and some cooperation with the French. It looks to me like that's pretty much the Labour Party's policy. And then you come to other areas where it's tax, whether it's the highest tax burden since the Second World War, windfall taxes on energy companies, whether it's lowering the threshold for the top rate of tax. So we're one of the most highly taxed G7 countries now. Only Italy has a higher top rate of tax. I mean, if you look at all of these issues, is the Conservative Party particularly conservative?
You make an excellent point, Tom, and one that I too have been making for some time. I am not a fan of windfall taxes, and I'm not a fan of the general direction of travel that we have been taking in the last couple of years. You are right. Of course, there is a clever game now that Starmer has started to play, which is he wants to sound as tough on immigration and have a go at high levels of taxation. But everybody who knows the Labour Party and everybody who knows Starmer, who was the chief architect, who made sure that Corbyn, who initially was wanting to vote Leave, then voted Remain. He's the chief architect of Project Rejoin and wanting to get us back into the EU and therefore open our borders completely. Now, I know the Conservative Party has been talking the talk and has yet to completely walk the walk, and that we need to see evidence and we need to see many, many, many more flights taking off back to those countries or even to Rwanda to actually get over the cynicism that I believe that the population quite rightly feels about the Conservative Party. And we need to get back to a growth plan which is underpinned by lower taxation. Those are fundamental Conservative principles. So these are things that the Prime Minister needs to really think long and hard about, because there are many, many MPs just like me who are thinking, when is it that the Conservative Party is actually going to become more conservative? And when is it ultimately going to recognise that the centre of gravity of Conservative policy has moved north now? It's moved out of London and the London suburbs, and it's moved north. And until we recognise that that is what's going to happen, you will see a lot of red wall seats, just like mine, falling back to Labour and unfortunately going back to the type of politics we saw not too long ago. We will be losing that great majority that Boris Johnson delivered for us.
I suppose one problem for Rishi Sunak, though, is that the Conservative Party is looking a lot less governable than it's looked in recent years. You're here saying that we're in danger of losing red wall to the Labour Party, and there will be plenty of your colleagues who will agree with you. Then, on the other hand, we've got Theresa May, a disgruntled ex-Prime Minister, saying today that the Prime Minister can't go ahead with the plans that he's made to tackle illegal immigration. So Rishi Sunak might have the best will in the world to get the Conservative Party more conservative, but will there just be too many thorns in his side to make it work?
Well, this is why Rishi now needs to show why he was the right man to become the Prime Minister. He has to overcome these problems which are inherently part of a party which is, by its very nature, a very broad church. So it's a very broad church, and therefore it makes it successful, but it's also the reason why it makes it a thorny party to want to lead. I don't really want to comment on Theresa May, other than to say I've got a lot of personal respect for her. Some of the things that she's pushing forward for making sure that people who live in social housing get a better deal from the management companies that run social housing. I get all of that, but a little bit of self-reflection and thinking about, letting the Prime Minister of the day get on with their job without someone sitting from the backbenchers sniping isn't doing that Prime Minister any great favours. So I'm sure Theresa understands that and will focus on what is the right thing to do. She must absolutely recognise that it is that very law that a lot of people are abusing to get into this country illegally, and it needs to be dealt with. And I'm sure, I feel confident, based on certainly some anecdotal initial positioning and decisions that Rishi has taken, that he is going to do it the correct way.
Well, it'll be fascinating to see the detail of this proposal in the coming weeks and months. No doubt a busy legislative calendar when you come back to Parliament in 2 weeks' time, if I'm correct on that timescale.
I have a serious question for you.
Oh, go ahead.
I'd like to know why you didn't tell me I could wear my Christmas jumper, but much more seriously, why is it that Stephen Pound has got a GB News mug that I don't have yet?
Marco, we're going to have to get you into the studio as soon as you're back to London. Get you into the studio, we'll give you a mug, and we might even give you some tinsel and all the rest of it. But no, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for joining us, Marco Longhi, of course, Conservative MP for Dudley North, who very much deserves a GB News mug, I think.
Quite right.
Well, let's mop up some of this conversation now, bringing in political commentator Danny Armstrong, who's with us here in the studio. I suppose the big question that we sort of touched on at the end there with Marco, this idea of Theresa May becoming perhaps sniping from the back benches, what Ted Heath became known as the incredible sulk, or should she be perhaps more statesmanlike and stay out? It's a tricky decision for her as an ex-Prime Minister. It is, and you did raise a great point with the difference between the Conservative Party and the Labour Party. We can't see any difference between them at the moment. There's big talk about the migrant crisis playing a big part in the next election. And if there is a party that isn't going to win over big votes with this issue, it's, of course, the Labour Party. Of course, we all saw them, didn't we? Those wokists, the leftists, those floppy-haired social justice warriors in London holding up signs saying, well, a Spanish doctor isn't going to take your job when you've got a BTEC in bricklaying and a 1 O-level. Of course, we all laughed at the time, didn't we? But the sneering and the punching down to the working class isn't going to win over any favours. As far as Theresa May is concerned, of course, I always thought of her as a bit of a what was it, a jock or bookish you were going on about before?
Well,
I missed the list.
The jock and nerd dichotomy. I suppose it's an Americanism, I suppose. But you get sort of the more bookish and then the more bolsterish prime ministers. I think she was more of a bookish one.
Mm-hmm. Well, you can't really imagine her coming out with some of the locker room talk of the jocks and then locking Rishi Sunak nearly. I've almost made up a different name for him there.
I think it was Rashid Sunak. What the President of the United States called him.
That's also my favourite curry as well. I mean, Theresa May, she's a poor man's Margaret Thatcher. I think she went down as. I think she'll go down in many people's books as that. In terms of the migrant crisis, if you're going to talk to, this is someone who left the country just this year, actually. For fear of perhaps falling out of a hotel window when I had to come back from Russia in June. And I think if I go back, there won't be very many good things waiting for me. I, of course, am a British citizen, so I had somewhere to go, I had somewhere to run to. In terms of the migrant crisis, if people are coming across the boats and risking it could be a greater risk of death coming across the channel than what might be chasing them through Europe and through the soft touch to the UK. For me, I would have taken it. I came back to Britain to avoid something that might have been waiting me back in the Kremlin and back in the walls of where Putin is sitting. So I do sympathise with people coming across the country across the channel, but I mean, really, there does have to be something done about it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you very much, Danny, and I'm sure we'll be back to you very shortly.
Well, let's now move on to an advert break. That's where we need to go next. The weather, after which the weather journalist Nathan Rao will be in the studio talking to us through these extreme weather conditions gripping North America. At least 60 people have now died in a once-in-a-generation storm. We'll be asking if there's any danger the weather system will affect us here in the UK. But first, that short break.
I'm Mark Dolan. Join me at 11 on GB News for Headliners, in which I'll be joined by two of the UK's top comedians discussing tomorrow's papers. If it's an important story, we'll cover it, but we'll have some fun along the way. Headliners, the late-night paper review that won't send you to sleep like the others will. 7 nights a week at 11 p.m. on GB News.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB+ radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good morning, it's just gone 10:25 and you're here with Tom Harwood and Olivia Utley on GB News in for Bev Turner.
Now, the worst Arctic blizzard in 45 years has hit the United States and Canada. New York Governor Kathy Hochul says that the winter storm is like going into a war zone as the death toll in the New York state rises to 28. At least 60 people have now died across the states in total.
While some weather forecasters predict that Britain could see its snowiest January in 12 years, the Met Office is playing down reports that this Arctic blast could bring heavy snow to the UK.
Well, weather journalist Nathan Rao joins us now to discuss the extreme weather that's currently gripping America and probably quite pertinently to people here in the United Kingdom, if any of that's going to affect us here.
Yes. Now, the extreme cold in the US is not going to affect us here. In the short term, what it's going to do is the cold air over the US is sort of bumping against milder air, which is coming up from the south, and that's firing up the jet stream, which goes from west to east across the Atlantic and over the UK. And in the Atlantic, there are low-pressure systems, which are the storm systems that we get all through the years. And because you've got this really strong jet stream, some of those could be pulled across by this extra strong jet stream and make our weather a bit unsettled in the next few days. So there's a link there, but in terms of a longer range, will the extreme cold in America come to the UK? No, that's not.
But by unsettled, what do you mean? Because, of course, the jet stream most people wouldn't think of as providing us nice, warm, lovely air from sort of Mexico and that, right? Am I completely wrong?
No, you're not. The jet stream can sometimes do that. So the jet stream sort of pretty much borders the cold air from the Arctic and the warmer air from the subtropics and the mid-latitudes, which is where we are. Now, in the summer, when the jet stream moves north, that's when we get these huge plumes of warm air coming up. If you think of that jet stream, it's like a boundary between the cold and the north, and the cold and the south. In the winter, when the jet stream plunges south across us, it pulls down the cold air from the north.
OK.
What it's doing at the moment, though, it is sort of coming over us. And when it does that, it's the low-pressure systems, the Atlantic, so like use it as a conveyor belt. And they hitch a ride on the jet stream. The jet stream can also strengthen these systems, and they come over to us. How wet and windy is it going to make us? Well, the Met Office is sort of saying it's unsettled. It's going to be an unsettled run-up to New Year. There are some gales around. There are some 70-mile-per-hour gales on the fringes, on the coastal regions. North-west is going to get the worst, because if you think it comes in from the west and up to the north and the southeast, will probably come off better. But that's how it affects us.
So a couple of years ago, we were having the beast from the east. Now we're going to have something. So you go rhyme something.
What
are we having from the west?
Pest from the west. The pest from the west. Yes.
Oh wow.
That's not too original. But it works. It works. But the interesting thing is that actually the beast from the east came in February. And it's that time of year that we always get the worst of the weather. So we always hope...
Just when you think everything's cheering up a bit.
You're more likely to get a white Easter than a white Christmas. Yeah. So all the discussions about white Christmas, which we thought was going to happen at some point.
So close.
So close. didn't really come off. It was
in the Highlands, apparently.
It was officially a white Christmas, yes, but I mean, for all of us, really, we didn't see much. It's more likely in January.
Okay, so
this feels like it's been a year of pretty extreme weather.
Weird.
Is this sort of a fluke, or is this something that we can expect to see more and more of?
The jury is still out. There is no doubt that our weather is changing. We cannot look at the summer we had. We had 40 degrees during the summer, which was absolutely. I was talking to you, Tom, about that. On the day that it happened, could hardly walk out the front door. It was roasting hot. We have never seen that before, and we are getting more sort of changes in our weather. So there's something. The weather is changing now. Whether that's man-made, whether it's climate change, whether it's there's various discussions going on about that, as we know. But certainly, in my opinion, at least, we are seeing more changeable weather happening.
It's interesting because we are getting... I suppose some people might have thought that in the summer that was really quite nice for us in the United Kingdom. It felt a bit...
I don't know about that.
A bit tropical. I don't know.
Do you remember that day? That was not quite
I thought
nice.
I was brave enough to go for a walk round the park. I was not.
I thought it was quite nice. Maybe, I don't know, I popped outside for a little bit. I mean, I wasn't bathing in it, but...
No, good idea. But even before that 40-degree day, we have temperatures in the mid-30s, and that, about 10 years ago, if you got temperatures in the mid-30s, that was big news for people like me. It's like mid-30s. Now it's like, mid-30s.
Yeah.
Let's wait for 40.
Are we sort of ready for this? I mean, Britain, our tubes, I notice, aren't heated or air-conditioned. Yeah. Are we ready for the extreme weather that we're
not. I mean, we saw just 12 days ago, I was sat right here when the snow fell before Christmas, which sparked all the Christmas lights. Everything was in chaos. The airports were cancelling, the tubes are all up the spout. Everything was in chaos. The roads were all
we can't do it with the leaves on the line
because the infrastructure, the trains, the buckles.
I suppose it makes sense in a country that rarely gets snow and rarely gets very, very hot things. You don't want to install all the very expensive systems that are only going to be used once a year. If this stuff gets more common, I suppose we are going to need to install these systems. It's going to become a political issue.
Yeah, but it's still probably not going to be as long as they get it in Scandinavia, where they have this infrastructure in place, because they get months and months and months of this. We still only, at the moment, we're getting, a big freeze for us. How long did it last? 10 days, I think, before in the run up to Christmas. So who knows? But we tend not to cope very well.
Say that again.
Well, yeah, no, absolutely. Well, it's a fascinating topic, and I think it is something we're going to be talking more and more about in the months and years ahead. But Nathan Rao, thank you so much for talking us through those big topics. Let's bring in now the political commentator Danny Armstrong for your views here. You've lived in Russia. That's very cold. I suppose anything here is basically tropical by comparison.
Yeah, well, you've done your homework there. Yeah, Russia is very cold. Yeah, I think the coldest that got down to when I was there was around about -31. Now, I am from Manchester, so I mean that was like manageable. And we are very ready for those 40-degree days, Nathan. If
are you ready for those?
Oh, yes, we are in Manchester. Yeah, you're exactly right. It is down to infrastructure and how you're prepared for it. Of course, over there they do plough money into things like gritters. Gritters aren't the gritters that we see here. Those little road sweepers that kind of funnel out salt onto the pavement. They're massive, big machines, and they work through the night pretty much every night for around about 4 months, and they can really.
Is it worth us investing in infrastructure like that? Or do you think, I mean, I remember when we had the odd snow day at school, everyone got a day off school, it was quite nice. Maybe we should just sort of trundle on as we are.
Yeah, well, for a country that's pretty much grey and drizzly for most of the year, I mean, we're kind of attracted to these very exotic, sort of harsh climates in the winter and then very, very hot days in the summer. But the short answer is no, there is no point, because and this is why the country grinds to a halt, because if there's some leaves on the train tracks, then the country grinds to a halt. So
when we do get these very, very cold snaps, it's always going to be the north now that's going to get them. In fact, now it's the north getting it and going this week. It's the northwest. Always. And if it does get worse, it's going to be the north.
Yeah, cheers to that, Nathan.
I'm down to Cornwall this afternoon, the place to be.
It seems very unfair, because so often the north is the place with the least amount of investment into the infrastructure to actually handle this sort of stuff. No doubt we'll be talking more and more about this as it goes, but it's time for another break, after which award-winning chef and restaurateur Aldo Zilli will be cooking up a storm in the studio. He'll be taking us through some Christmas leftover recipes. Very, very important stuff. So to make sure that all that food doesn't go to waste, stick around for that. That's after this short break.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prisons?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here. You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. B, I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
It's just gone 10:36 and you're here with Tom Harwood and Olivia Utley in with Bev Turner today on GB News.
Now, from leftover turkey to the cheese boards that you perhaps couldn't quite finish. Many of us have been left with excess foods in our fridges, or indeed excess food in our fridges after the Christmas period. This year, perhaps more than ever, we want to get the most out of that festive food amid the cost of living crisis that's gripped the nation.
But don't fear, award-winning chef Aldo Zilli is joining us in the studio to share some delicious recipes to help us make the most out of our Christmas leftovers. And he's looking very Christmassy indeed.
Aldo, I feel so underdressed.
I thought we were quite Christmassy,
Christmas
Tom. We've been put
jumpers,
to shame.
I don't have any of those, so I got the jacket. I'm taking these glasses off.
Do you know what? I could wear those, and then at least there's some.
There you go. You carry on, and I'm taking my hat off as well.
There we go. There we go. OK, much better. I can see.
A bit more recognisable now.
Hey.
OK, Christmas turkey is in here. This is a leftover Christmas turkey.
So.
OK, so basically, you know, I've learned through the years of Christmas. I'm Italian, but I have an English wife. So tradition every Christmas is turkey. Of course. But this year we had a little bit more. We had turkey, we had a barbecue. My eldest daughter came, Laura, she helped me cook outside. We had a lovely barbecue with beef and veal and a small turkey.
OK.
So we went for a very small turkey. So we all tasted the turkey. Yeah. And I still got a little bit of leftovers. So I made you a little turkey stew here.
Oh, turkey stew. That's
Please. Oh, that's
And I covered it
incredible.
with this lovely pizza bread that was leftover pizza bread.
Yeah.
So I made it into that, and then I covered the turkey.
So what can you throw into a turkey stew? What sort of stuff?
Pretty much the fridge is in here. So there's some pancetta. There is some Neapolitan broccoli in there. Loads of onions as a base, because onions gives a lot of flavour. And then I flavoured it with some chilli, so it's got a little
I can
kick.
smell it. That's incredible.
Yeah, so it's got a little kick, cream, and I had a little bit of truffle left. So from the.
I wish my fridge was more like yours. I never have a bit of leftover truffle left. Oh, thank you very much.
And would you like a little bit?
I'd love some, Aldo.
Pass this over to you.
So yeah, this is the leftover turkey. But you know, traditions every Christmas change.
Can you grab these?
This year, I wanted to be a little bit more adventurous with my cooking, and because I had all of my family, I had my grandson for the first time this Christmas. You know, he's 7 years old, so we still did the Santa. We still did, you know, all the things I haven't done for years, because my kids, you know, I've got 2 teenagers. One's 15 and one's 17, nearly, in March. And so, you know, what I decided to do this year, very small amount of presents. And my mum and dad used to make me really work for my presents, because in those days, I'm the youngest of 9, so Christmas was a big
family.
Expensive December.
And we never got presents because we lived in poverty, to be honest. But Christmas Day, we had to write a letter to my parents and put it under the plate. And my little Twiggy this year, she had to write me a letter to get a new phone if she wants a new phone. She had to write me, and she wrote the most moving letters to me and my wife, Nikki, that I've ever seen in my life. So that is really, I brought back loads of old traditions this year. And because we haven't had Christmas really for a few years, have we? With
I suppose that is something that food can do as well. It sort of brings everyone together around the table, I suppose, in a way that perhaps most families haven't for the last few years, given the situation that the world has been plunged into.
We weren't allowed, so this year was really, really special. And then I had some leftover dough, and I made this focaccia here. I mean, this.
Now, how long does it take to make an incredible piece? Because I mean, if I had some dough sitting on the table or whatever, I'm not sure I could do that.
Okay, so I'll let you taste a bit of that. And then a little bit for you, my dear.
Pass it around, yeah.
Thank you very much.
I feel like I'm in a restaurant.
I have to say, I've been munching away as you've been talking, and it is absolutely delicious.
Perfect amount of chili, so good.
Yeah.
Just lifts it, doesn't it?
And then I made some Italian bubble and squeak here.
Oh, Italian bubble and
Yes.
squeak.
So this is fusion cuisine, right?
What I've done, look, these are potatoes. These are potato skins, right? So I've baked the potatoes, I've rubbed them with a bit of oil, I baked them for an hour, and then I scoop them out, and I stuffed them all with the vegetables leftovers. Look at the sprouts here.
Yeah.
My Laura, my daughter, did the sprouts this year, and she's got this recipe that she said it was amazing, but you know, they're a bit overcooked.
But it doesn't matter if you sort of throw it all in together and it's all,
Yeah, so we stuff the potatoes again, we bake them in the oven, and then the last minute I beat some egg with some Parmesan cheese and cover them on top.
Is that what makes it Italian?
Yes, the carbonara bubble and squeak.
This focaccia is absolutely fantastic. I've got a question. I like making bread, but my proving technique, I don't think I'm getting it right, because on Bake Off they have those neat little proving drawers, but I don't want to have one of those in my kitchen. What do you do to get that right?
Warm places.
Just
warm
places.
Don't. The weather's been pretty tough and cold for pruning bread and pizza dough, and you know, leave it near the stove, near the kitchen, where it's warmer than anywhere else. Even next to radiators.
Okay.
Yeah. So if you've got a radiator that's going all the time, just leave it near there, and it will work. It really will work. But making a focaccia like this takes a couple of days.
Yeah.
You know, it's
and
not
a bit more skill than
it's not a 5-minute wonder.
So what would be your top tip to people who might be sitting at home now, watching the television, with a fridge sort of half full of yesterday's food, thinking, I want to make something easy. I want to throw this all together, perhaps. I want to make something for lunch today out of all of my leftovers from the last couple of days. What would be your number one tip?
Well, if you've got sausages, then sausages and mash. If you've got loads of cheese, then a really good mac and cheese. Cook some pasta on the side. Throw all the cheese into some butter and flour and milk and make a white sauce, and then throw loads of cheese in it, melt it all together and put it on top of the pasta, bake it. And everybody loves mac and cheese. I don't know anyone in the world that doesn't like mac and cheese.
Yeah.
But vegetables, you know, people have a lot of leftover vegetables. Do not, please, throw them away, because they're so valuable. I mean, look, this is your 5 a day, if you like.
Yeah.
You know, it's incredible. And desserts, you know, I'm doing a dessert item later on this channel.
Oh, go on, give us some hints.
And I made an amazing dessert with all the leftover desserts. My mother-in-law, Maureen, is incredibly convinced that Christmas Day has to be Christmas pudding with brandy.
Yes.
So,
even if you don't eat it, you have to light it.
And she forgot to buy it, and so did I, and so did my wife, and so did Laura, and so did everybody else.
Oh.
So my brother-in-law saved the day. He turned up on Christmas Eve with a Christmas pudding. So on Christmas Day, at the end of the day, we forgot it was in the fridge. So it came out later on, brandy, bit of brandy.
Sounds like a chaotic Christmas in the silly
it stayed on the table because nobody wanted it, because everybody was so full.
Everyone says that at Christmas. I'm always up for a Christmas pudding. Everyone else goes, oh God, no, couldn't manage anymore.
I always have a symbolic.
I
have a symbolic bit.
I have a
It's not
proper
that I
helping.
actually want to eat it. I'll just have a bit. But I think the best thing about it is they're in the middle of the table. It's up in flames. You know, it's the drama of the whole thing.
And then the panettone, you know, the Italian Christmas cake, that gets left over. So in this dessert I made for later, it's got everything like that. It's got all of those ingredients: the panettone, the creme pat. It's got the liqueur, and it's got the brandy from the Christmas pudding that we didn't eat.
I wish I'd had the segment yesterday, because last night I had panettone and pancetta just by itself for dinner.
Pancetta?
Pancetta on.
Well,
It's
that's
actually
a
quite
new
nice. The raisins with the bacon, salty and sweet.
Well done.
It was mainly because Tesco was closed.
Wow, I must try that. I never tried panettone with pancetta.
There you go, tip from me.
And it was nice.
It was really nice. To be honest, got back from a run, Tesco was closed, didn't know what to do.
Just
all
throw
I had in the
whatever it is
fridge.
together.
But it was great. I wish I'd had some of Aldo's tips.
Wow. Well, Danny, you have been quietly eating there in the. What do you make of the food?
It's brilliant. I mean, I spent most of my adult life in Russia, so you can imagine some of the atrocities that I've had on Christmas Day. But Christmas isn't celebrated on the 25th of December in Russia. New Year is the main thing, which is like Christmas, your birthday, your missus's birthday, your boyfriend's birthday, your mother-in-law's birthday, your dad's birthday, and everybody's birthday rolled into one. And it's a massive, massive celebration. Everybody gets 10 days off from the 1st till the 10th of January, and they celebrate Old Christmas on the 7th of January. And can you guess what they do on that?
What's they do?
They drink loads and loads of vodka.
Of course they do. Of course
They get very, very merry. And it is, of course, like a big celebration, like everybody's birthday rolled into one, and every special day you can ever imagine. So, yeah, but this is much more preferable to some of the pickled
what I've learned
cucumbers that I've had on December in Russia, yeah.
I think the main thing I've learned this year is no starters.
Oh, yeah.
No starters.
Good idea.
No, I didn't. People every year, they by the time the turkey roast and everything, all the trimmings are ready, they're not hungry anymore.
Can I ask a question?
And have lunch at 1 o'clock, not at 4 o'clock in the afternoon.
Well, then you get the King's speech at least.
We waited this year until the King had spoken, until after we ate.
Oh, that's a very good idea.
Which I don't know why we arrived at that. I thought I was getting really quite hungry by that point, and there's only a limited number of twiglets that can be passed around before the time at which.
No, we did it the other way around. And by then, everybody had a glass of champagne and a glass of wine, so the King sounded a lot more powerful.
We watched The King on iPlayer and we weren't allowed to look on social media in case there were spoilers. So we were banned.
Spoilers. Of course, he's going to say something really
huge.
Oh no! To be honest, I hope this isn't unpatriotic to say. I think I could probably have guessed what he was going to say several weeks beforehand. I don't think there was. It's nice to watch, and it's a unifying moment and all the rest of it. I don't think it's particularly profound.
You might have a point there.
But I nearly had a heart attack when I had to pick my grandmother up for the King's speech, because we were on cooking duty, but we had to push back Christmas lunch from, I think it was 2 till 3 till 4, because our oven isn't very good. So we were pushing it back and we had to pick my grandmother up, and she's a very, very big fan of the royal family.
I'm not going to let you get away with that. You've got to eat vegetables.
Do you have
That's what my mum used to say. Eat your vegetables.
This is very, very important.
Can I ask a question? Do you, prawn cocktail, yes or no?
No way.
No, it's awful. Thank you very much.
Cocktail.
Absolutely awful for a
prawns,
starter.
yes.
Prawn cocktail is apparently one of the most Googled for Christmas foods this year.
You mean the crisps, or...?
Smoked salmon is the only acceptable starter, but I'm with Aldo. Skip the starter altogether.
Just knock them on the head. Just have a glass of champagne.
Yeah.
Well, just in case my mother is watching, I do want to say I am eating my vegetables.
He's been a good boy today.
This is much better than English bubble and squeak, I have to say.
But breakfast is important. You know, you wake up Christmas morning, a nice bit of smoked salmon with lots of pepper and lemon. Not even eggs. I mean, if you don't want the eggs, just have the smoked salmon, you know, with a little bit of brown toast and a glass of champagne. Have a little champagne breakfast.
I'm noticing a
Christmas
theme here,
Day.
Aldo.
It's a shame that Christmas Day is gone now, because all these tips, they would have been good.
People need to write them down.
Yes.
People need to write them down and get them ready for next year. Or indeed, some of these leftover things, I'm sure there will be many, many, many fridges
but there's New Year
across the country that are very full. And this stuff, I've got to say, I'm getting the stuff out of my teeth, but it's delicious. It's so nice to eat. So thank you so much for bringing it in.
Yeah.
My gosh, this is better than my mains.
Your mum will be watching.
For the very first time on television, you've actually got the real leftovers of Aldo Zilli's house.
Incredible.
This has never happened before.
Well, Aldo, thank you so much for coming in and for providing this incredible food for us as well. Really, really do appreciate it. Not least because it means that I won't have to cook myself lunch now. That's all very good. Well, coming up next is some GB views. You have been writing in about all of the different things that we've been talking about today. Of course, we've been talking about the weather. We've been talking a little bit about politics as well. And Peter has written in to say, we're not having extreme weather, we're just having weather. Centuries ago, the Thames regularly froze over and winters were terrible. Summers were also hotter, so to say we're having extreme weather is untrue. Well, I'm not sure that that's quite right. I mean, yes, Peter, the Thames did freeze over in what was called the mini ice age, but that was quite extreme. And we can have extreme weather in the past and that still makes it extreme.
Yeah, and we are still talking about the fact that the Thames did freeze over once upon a time, which suggests it was pretty rare.
Best fact about that, you know, we were talking earlier about it's more likely to snow on Easter than it is at Christmas. Apparently the reason we associate snow with Christmas is because Charles Dickens grew up during that mini ice age, when the Thames froze over, when it snowed every Christmas. And so when he was writing all of his great Victorian novels, particularly writing about Scrooge and the rest of it, that was all set in his idea of his childhood Christmas.
That is absolutely fascinating. That's just stuck, and now every Christmas film there ever is, it's...
Yeah, it has to have snow, it has to have all of the things that Charles Dickens grew up with. That's, that's at least a theory that I read online, so I'm sure it's very, very true. But we've got more people writing in.
Yes. Phil has asked, will the train strike be cancelled when the trains can't run due to snowfall so they get paid for not working? Train operators should not agree to such a situation.
Well, I'm not quite sure what Phil was asking there. Yeah, no, but I suppose the train situation across the whole of the winter period has been pretty shocking. I've not even tried to get on trains this year. I've been driving all over the place. But yeah, moving on.
And every festive period, hundreds of dogs across the country are rescued from abandonment or taken into animal shelters. With the increases in the cost of living, this year will be no different.
No, dogs' homes across the country are warning of an increase in abandoned pets. We sent our West Midlands reporter Jack Carson to Birmingham Dogs Home to find out how they're giving man's best friend a second chance.
A dog is for life, not just for Christmas. The phrase coined by the charity Dogs Trust remains as true as ever, 40 years later. Every Christmas, the RSPCA estimate 4,000 animals are dumped in England and Wales. When they're found, many are brought to charities like Birmingham Dogs Home and their Sunnyside Centre in Wolverhampton. Centre manager Karen Doy says the number of dogs brought here is up on last year.
The dog wardens are bringing the dogs in daily. This particular centre has 5 local authorities, and I think there's 9 altogether between the 2 sites, as and Birmingham at Solihull. So we do get a lot of dogs in. We're up this year, there's 250 dogs have come in to date, more this year than last year. So we are extremely pushed for space. We're getting inquiries daily about people asking if we can help take their dogs in. They can't afford them any longer.
The charity has existed in the Midlands for more than 130 years. But in the middle of a cost of living crisis, keeping a place like this open has been made more difficult over the past year, as head of fundraising Fee Harrison explains.
So we have full kennels, which means that we have more mouths to feed, more vet bills, more kennels to keep warm. So our fundraising appeal for Christmas is more important than ever. We have lots of support from local businesses, which is great. So people are bringing down donations of food and biscuits and toys, which is fabulous. We've also got an appeal on our website where people can go on there and they can donate online. They can donate in memory of people and in memory of their dogs. So we're trying to be creative and do as many things as we can just to keep that support coming in.
It's not just donations that this centre needs. For dogs, this place is full, and so they need people to come and adopt dogs, like Timothy. And dogs to adopt come in all shapes and sizes. This is Donald. He's a 9-month-old American Bulldog cross and arrived at the centre in October. But unfortunately, upon his arrival, he had to have surgery.
He came into us in October. He had unfortunately got a damaged left hind leg, so we sent him for x-rays straight away. Unfortunately, it did turn out that he did have an untreated injury to his leg. He had both damaged his stifle, his pelvis and his femur. So we sent him to have amputation because that was the only thing we could do to make him comfortable. He is definitely not dampened his spirits, and he's a really happy little chap, loving life still, so that's nice.
Without Birmingham Dogs Home, Donald would not be the bouncy 9-month-year-old pup he is today. This Christmas and New Year, when the calls come in from people who can no longer look after their canine companion, charities like this across the country will be there to love and look after them until they can hopefully find their forever home. Jack Carson, GB News.
Oh, thanks, Jack, for bringing that. I suppose it's a bit of an uplifting story. There are people working there with the dogs to make sure that those dogs have homes. Really important stuff. We are, after all, a nation of animal lovers. Well, coming up, we'll be reflecting on the political rollercoaster of last year. That, of course, is after a short break and after we get all of that lovely food absolutely finished off from Alto Silly. So after a short break, stay with us here on GB News.
Looking ahead to today's weather, and the UK is looking chilly for some, though rain and cloud will spread eastwards this morning. Let's take a look at the details for you. Across southwest England, a band of rain and strong winds will spread eastwards this morning with some heavy spells of rain at times. Coastal gales are likely across northern Cornwall and Devon. A mostly dry morning for London and the southeast, though there may be an odd shower for the English Channel coasts and becoming increasingly cloudy. A band of rain will affect southern Wales through this morning with some heavy bursts at times, strong winds too, with coastal gales possible. Looking across the Midlands this morning, and it will be dry but cloudy in the east. Across the west, a band of rain with some heavy spells and strong winds will push in. A cold start across northeast England this morning ahead of a band of cloud and rain spreading in from the west. Strong winds too, especially over high ground. Dry to start across eastern parts of Scotland. A band of rain, some of which will fall as snow at first, will spread in from the west through this morning. A band of rain will clear away to the northeast of Northern Ireland this morning, though some showers will linger behind. A windy morning too, especially around coasts at first. A band of rain will continue to spread eastward this afternoon, remaining windy and a risk of coastal gales. And that is how the weather is shaping up for the rest of the day.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
The guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good morning and welcome to Today with Tom Harwood and Olivia Utley on GB News, in for Bev Turner.
Now, Rishi Sunak has been warned by the ex-Prime Minister Theresa May to not water down modern slavery laws to make it harder to claim asylum in the UK. But with the number of cross-channel migrants hitting nearly 46,000 this year, should the Prime Minister stick to the plan?
Meanwhile, Russian President Vladimir Putin has said he is ready to engage in peace talks with Ukraine, despite ordering more attacks on the country.
And with the end of the year fast approaching, everyone is now beginning to think what the year of 2023 could bring for them. World-famous astrologer Marjorie Orr will be giving her predictions for the year ahead.
And of course, this show is nothing without you and your views. Email us on gbviews@gbnews.uk or tweet me at gbnews to have your say.
Well, to the big news that broke last night. That's, of course, Prime Minister, or the former Prime Minister, I should say, Theresa May, warning Rishi Sunak to not adjust those modern slavery laws that she put in place. Rishi Sunak wants to adjust them, of course, to make it harder to claim asylum in the UK. Well, meanwhile, all of this, of course, the record number of migrants has reached almost 46,000. That's those coming across by small boat across the Channel illegally. And solving this crisis could be a key political issue in the next general election.
Meanwhile, the last 12 months have been an absolute political rollercoaster, to say the least. From Partygate to Beergate, those within UK politics haven't shied away from a scandal.
And what was it? 4 chancellors, 3 prime ministers. There must have been 2 of something.
2 monarchs?
I think there are 6 education secretaries. 2 monarchs. It's like a verse of the 12 days of Christmas. So let's deep dive into the political year that was 2022. Now, political commentator Anna McGovern joins us in the studio. Anna, thank you so much for being with us. I suppose, first of all, what's the big takeaway from this year? There's almost been too much to sort of compute.
Yes, absolutely. And I think so much has happened this year. And I think many people are regarding this year as one of the worst years yet. You know, we had everything happening with Ukraine, for example. We've had Partygate. We're coming out of the coronavirus and those terrible few years where we're all locked down in our homes. And this migrant crisis as well that's ongoing. I think many people are feeling very disheartened with the government because we're seeing, you know, scandal after scandal, mistake after mistake. And that's leading a lot of people to lose a lot of faith. And I think this will have a really big impact in what we see in the next general election.
We often say that Rishi Sunak has a very full in tray. What would you say are the biggest challenges facing him next year?
I think absolutely the migrant crisis, and I think that will be something that will dominate the next election and could be the difference between if the Conservatives get back in government or not. I think with the government, they've offered many empty platitudes in terms of the migrant crisis. You know, we've had 13,000 Albanian immigrants come into this country this year alone. And people who are saying it's not an invasion, it absolutely is. And I think there's been so many of these empty platitudes that have been offered, and a lot of these sort of half-hearted policies and ideas suggested when actually people are looking for some action to actually come into place.
Do you think migration will be the biggest issue at a time when people are facing record energy bills, when pay packets are going down, when people are losing their jobs, when the economy is where it is and the tax burden is where it is? You think migration will be bigger?
I think that will also be a big part of it as well. You know, many people have been really struggling in terms of the cost of living crisis, a lot of things getting more expensive. And I think many of these problems are starting to add up. And again, is a reason why people are losing faith in the government. But in terms of the migration crisis, you know, with record high scale of number of people coming into this country, it's putting pressure on these services and then increasing that tax burden as well, which we pay for. And it means that a lot of people, that, you know, the services that they want to access, that is getting a lot harder to.
Do you think Rishi Sunak actually has the political power to do anything about it? Because you say that he's coming up with empty platitudes. He does seem to be pushing together some sort of coherent plan. The question is whether he's actually able to implement it, because it feels at the moment as though the Conservative Party is just so fractured. You've got the Trussites, you've got the Borisites, you've got the Mayites.
Are there any Mayites? There's Theresa May.
Can he do anything about it, even if he wants to?
Yeah, we've had 3 prime ministers, I think, this year alone, and you know, each prime minister bringing in their own different set of policies. I don't think he has the political power to do it, and I don't think he has the strength to lead this country forward. I think the Conservatives and many people have lost faith because they'll say one thing, but then they actually haven't, implemented it as they said they would. The migration crisis, for example, I think that's one of the biggest issues. You know, people voted for Brexit, for the government to take control of our borders, and they simply haven't, and the problem is getting worse and worse. So I think Rishi Sunak would actually need to really act on the policies that they promised they would to win back the trust of the voters, but I don't think that's going to happen.
Do we need to here make a pretty important distinction between illegal migration and legal migration? Because, of course, after we left the European Union, we have a points-based system where people, if they can speak the language and provide a skill, and we know there are some some skills gaps in the UK in the health service, in the service sector, in other areas. Is there a distinction we need to make between those who illegally enter on small boats versus those who come and make it through the points-based system and play by the rules?
Yes, absolutely. And I think if you play by the rules and you come here legally, you should come to this country. However, the majority of people are coming here illegally.
The majority?
Well, in terms of they're taking, they're using the services, and as soon as they come into the country across the border, they'll get, they can
I think
come
it's
into
about 1/10 of the number that come legally are coming illegally.
And when they come in illegally, they'll take the, they'll use services. They get into the 5-star hotels. They get handed a blanket, a pizza, and many people, I think, who don't come here legally into this country, they have to go through all these processes when some people are just coming in straight away and get it handed to them on a plate. And I don't think that's right.
But there's a question mark too, isn't there, Tom and everyone really, over whether the points-based system is actually working as it should, because you've got, obviously, students are allowed in on the points-based visa. That might seem sensible. But then you've got some of them not doing very useful degrees to the country. You've got some of them bringing in 3 or 4 family members per person. Is there a problem subsequently, at the same time as the illegal immigration problem, with legal migration?
I'm not sure that the legal migration issue is as salient as the illegal one. If we talk about this conversation, and you and I have conducted many political interviews, you'll see politicians always point to the boats as the problem. I think their post bags are full of people talking about the people coming in illegally. Because if we look at that number, the 500,000 net migration, legal migration we saw this year, 150,000 were Ukrainian, 120,000 were from Hong Kong, a number were from Afghanistan. These are the people that we invited over on these programmes. Around 100,000 were students. The number of economic migrants that came were 150,000, a tiny fraction of the 500,000 number that led the headlines, really.
Not that tiny a fraction.
It's quite small as a fraction of 500,000.
I think some people will feel there are 2 subsequent problems running alongside each other here, and the points-based migration system can work, but it might need a little bit of finessing.
But perhaps, and I suppose that's one of the things with a points-based system, you can always change it as your needs develop. And clearly there are some areas where we have real skills shortages, and the labour force, people have left it.
You can say that again,
Yeah, well, I mean, it's a fascinating issue, and no doubt there'll be much more to say on it. But for now, thank you, Anna McGovern, for coming in and talking through that. Let's delve in further now. Peter Spencer, the political commentator, joins us down the line. Peter, I suppose let's start off by sticking with migration. I do want to cover some other issues as well. But this is a really tricky thicket for the government.
It is, but I'm actually rather with you. I think that Tom, I think that the whole thing is slightly overblown. You talk about 40,000 people or something coming over. We're in a population of 56 million. I think we can more or less accommodate that. Of course, there are huge pinch points in certain areas, pressures on the health service and pressures on the education and so on. But in the grand scheme of things, I think that this thing is to some extent rather fueled by right-wing media and is got altogether out of proportion. I mean, compare and contrast with the NHS, where we have 1 in 10 people actually on an NHS waiting list. Now where's the crisis? That's where you find it.
And, of course, the other crisis that we actually haven't been talking about that much over Christmas but is still burning away is inflation. And, of course, analysts are predicting that inflation will start to go down next year. But will it be enough? Will it be soon enough?
That's a very difficult question. I mean, I have to say that the official figures suggest that we're heading into a rather worse economic situation than was anticipated, which suggests that getting inflation down might take a little bit longer. And of course, here we talk about Rishi Sunak's inbox. Here is a huge problem when he's got up something approaching 1 million people in various walks of life, either going on strike or threatening to go on strike. And he's trying to hold the line and make the point. Look, if we allow wages to go up in line with inflation, then that will actually make inflation worse, which will hit the poorest hardest. So there are plenty of people on the right of the Tory party are ragging him on, saying, this is your Thatcher moment, you go for it. But at the same time, there are very, very real concerns, particularly over the health service. And consider the backdrop to all this. A little while back, the government actually asked the King's Fund think tank to have a good, thoroughgoing look at the NHS, and they came back and talk about red faces in Whitehall. They said, look, the NHS has suffered a decade of neglect. Upshot, not enough staff, not enough equipment, not enough up-to-date buildings. And so you find the nurses have suddenly decided, look, up with this, we will not put, and gone on strike. And there's an awful lot of public sympathy for them.
Yes.
And when we... Yeah.
There certainly is, but I read that King's Fund report because it was really interesting. It pointed to a lot of failures in terms of the management, but it also pointed to a 40% funding increase from 2010 compared to 2022. In 2010-11, the funding was 130.2 billion a year. In 2022-23, it's 180.2 billion a year. That's a 40% increase in the amount of money going in. That's more than the population's gone up by. That's inflation adjusted, I should say. We're putting in more money to the health service than we've ever put in before, and yet the outcomes seem like they've never seemed worse.
Yeah, we're putting more, but not enough. People are living longer. As they get towards the end of their life, they become more frail. They need more health care. And so what do? Do you say, let's make smoking compulsory so people won't live so long? And that way, of course, you won't have those pressures on the health service. But, I mean, there's another aspect to all this, which is you mentioned how the NHS is run, and indeed how nurses are paid. They get, actually, although their wages have fallen way behind over the years, the fact is they get very generous pensions. There is an argument that says, why don't you change this round a little bit so that the pensions aren't quite so generous, but they've got more money in their pocket right now, which is jolly handy when they've got to pay the lecky bill next month.
Yeah. That's a really interesting thing. I think one of the other things that was picked up was the capital investment budget, to get technical. Since 2014, George Osborne started raiding that so that they weren't buying new MRI scanners and they're not buying all the new tech that might actually make the thing run better. And instead they were going for more nursing places, which might look good on a manifesto, but actually in terms of a nurse is only as good as the equipment that they can, or maybe a nurse could be so much more efficient if they had the new tech. And the NHS hasn't had much new tech. We haven't been buying any of this stuff.
Precisely. And another point that is worth looking at is actually how the NHS is structured. There are arguments, it is said, for a kind of a much less top-down system of management, far fewer targets, far more sort of devolved management, so that people can actually, that managers can make local decisions rather than having to comply with rules which are placed upon them from above. There's, I mean, the interesting thing about all this is that we've had Rishi Sunak having his brilliant idea, let's sort out immigration. Well, there are a fair few people within either commentators or within the Tory party say, you want a great idea? Your great idea should be saying, we're going to have a real root and branch look at the NHS. Oh, and in the process, of course, you can adjust the way nurses and paramedics are paid, and thus buy off that problem at the same time.
So if you could pop out your crystal ball, and I know that this is probably a fool's errand when it comes to predicting. I mean, the last 12 months was so unpredictable. The next 12 will probably be just as unpredictable. Where is the Conservative Party in the polls in 12 months' time? Has Rishi Sunak been able to claw back some credibility and some respect, quite frankly, from the British people?
I think he has. I mean, he always outstrips, in terms of polling popularity, his party, and he has got, there's no question about it, he's got a dullness dividend. I mean, in actual fact, morale in number 10 has picked up rather, because they say, hey, we've got a prime minister who doesn't just have a glance at what's in the red boxes, come up with a wacky wheeze at breakfast time and then start arguing against it by lunchtime. In other words, Boris Johnson. followed by Liz Truss, who's too busy inventing her own reality to bother about worrying about anyone else's reality. I mean, Keir Starmer, the Labour leader, his take was, look, trying to tie Boris Johnson down is like trying to nail custard to a wall. trying to tie Liz Truss down is like trying to shoot a fish in a barrel. Well, that's his take, but at the same time, it's also has to be said to some extent the take of people in Downing Street, people trying to run the show. Against that, what we have, I mean, I wrote a headline a little while ago saying, you know, is Britain ungovernable, ? Because what we've seen is the breakdown in the command structure within the Conservative Party.
Yes.
I mean, we look at the outside and say, oh, my goodness gracious me, what's going to happen next? Oh, perma-crisis. But we're only spectators. These guys have lived through it and they've come out the other side collectively, if you pardon my saying so, just a little bit bonkers. I mean, the normal rule of thumb is that if there's something with which a Tory backbencher disagrees, he has a good old grumble about it, then toes the line. But what's been happening since Sunak's taken over has been rebellion after rebellion.
Yeah.
And at some point, he's had to decide, listen, which faction am I going to appease here?
Well, ever since COVID, it's felt like this government that has a notional majority of, I think, 70 now, is actually a hung parliament. It doesn't feel like a big majority government. But I suppose the big question going forward, is this a particular problem for the Conservative Party? Or is this just how a parliament works in the age of social media, in the age of constituents pelting MPs and MPs feeling much more independent from party structures? Would a Labour majority government have the same issue? I think it's a big question going forward, but I'm afraid we have run to the end of that segment. But Peter, Spencer, thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate your thoughts. We'll have to get you back very, very soon because it is a fascinating thing to talk through. But let's just end this conversation now with Danny Armstrong, who's still with us. Ungovernable Conservative Party.
Well, yeah, I mean, it sounds very good. If you'll excuse me, and you just gave me a name, Denny Armstrong. That's what it's called in Russia, actually, because they can't pronounce Danny. Yeah, just fascinating talk with Peter there. I think I'll pick up on a couple of points. Of course, I mean, we have illegal migration. Of course, the Conservative Party needs to get hard on that if they've got any chance of winning the next election. I think Rishi Sunak should pick up his heels, stop dragging his heels on that particular issue. But then we have legal migration. And there is a big question about, do we really need any more legal migration? Of course, we have read a lot of Albanian men of around about my age or finding age, if I can just get to the end of this little point before I let you in, Olivia, saying they want to come over and they want to be builders or they want to enter the construction trade or anything like that. Do we really need more manual labourers? I mean, it's usually the working classes that get lumbered with the downsides of migration, whether it be illegal or legal. The ghettos in the places where they live, they get undercut in their jobs.
We do seem to have a bit of a shortage in that industry in particular. Lots of people have been trying to, build extensions and whatever, and trying to find people to do the work. It's getting much harder.
Mm-hmm. Probably.
I suppose the other issue which ties into all of this is, can we support these legal migration? And that is a question about tax. And we sort of skirted around it a bit there with Peter Spencer, who thinks we should be investing more in the NHS. We know that we've got this argument going on, existential argument in the Conservative Party. Is the way to get out of our current economic crisis just to tax people more, to invest more in the NHS, to allow, more migrants to come over? Or do we have to have a low tax policy where we're sort of building our way to growth that way? Which way do you think Rishi Sunak is going to go in the new year? Because he's given us pretty mixed messages, I would say.
Yeah, well, I would say, we buried my dear old granddad this month, so it means I've spent the last few months in and out of NHS hospitals. My mother is an NHS employee. She works around the corner from the hospital that I was born in, the birthplace of the NHS, Trafford General, in Manchester. She works in the Path Lab. And she is kind of one of many people who feel that it's disgruntled that the country see the NHS as simply nurses. Nurses have a big voice, and I think during the strikes particularly, they trade very heavily on the fact that people think that they're nurses and they're saving people left, right and centre. I wouldn't think that just purely based on my experience of being in and out of NHS hospitals, as I say, over the last few months, throwing money at the problem isn't something that is going to solve it. There are often people who work in these jobs, nurses or porters or whatever, who we're talking about low-skilled manual labour, as it were, just a step up from manual labour. Some of them aren't up to it. Some of them don't speak the language. Some of them have real problems with communication, not to get, but people will throw words at you, buzzwords like xenophobic or something like that, something that you can't get out of, and to kind of disappear that problem away. For my money, I don't see a way out of it as just throwing money at the NHS, pumping money that we don't have into the NHS to solve a problem that isn't going to be solved that way.
Yeah, very interesting. Thank you very much, Danny. Now, on to further afield, getting outside of Westminster, and the war in Ukraine is rumbling on. Russian President Vladimir Putin has said he is ready to engage in peace talks, but he's still ordering more attacks on the country. More of that after the break.
I'm Mark Dolan. Join me at 11 on GB News for Headliners, in which I'll be joined by two of the UK's top comedians discussing tomorrow's papers. If it's an important story, we'll cover it, but we'll have some fun along the way. Headliners, the late-night paper review that won't send you to sleep like the others will. 7 nights a week at 11 p.m. on GB News.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton Tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Lawrence Fox, on GB News. Frank, fun, fearless, and sometimes serious. Much as I love a Friday night punch-up, what I really want is a battle of ideas. I want to look at things differently. I want to hear different voices and engage with your unique experiences. Every Friday at 7 p.m. on GB News.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Well, welcome back. It's just gone 11:25. You're watching GB News here with me, Tom Harwood, and Olivia Utley. We're in today for Bev Turner.
Russian President Vladimir Putin has claimed that Russia is ready for peace talks to end the war in Ukraine. A state television interview on Sunday, he said, "It's not us who refuse talks, it's them."
Well, yesterday, Ukraine's foreign minister announced that his government aims to have a peace summit by the end of February at the UN with the Secretary General with the UN Secretary General as a possible mediator.
So could talks really be on the horizon?
Well, let's bring in political commentator Reem Ibrahim first of all. Reem, I can't take anything that Vladimir Putin or Sergei Lavrov or anyone in that crony administration say. I can't take anything that they say seriously.
I completely agree. I think we cannot take anything that they say as truth and or as fact, because I think that a lot of the things that they say are sort of warped into this sort of propaganda that the Russian government seem to be putting out there. And this idea that, you know, they're the ones that are sort of trying to mediate peace and the Ukrainians are refusing it, it's just completely not true. And I think that what we're thinking about at the moment is a sort of, the fact that the Russians are the aggressors. They want to have these peace talks in order for them to be able to secure the territories that they've been able to take. They want the sort of recognition for the annexation of the Crimea in 2014. They want to be able to sort of have that recognition, and the Ukrainians just will not give it to them. And I think that's right. We do not appease aggressors.
And there are people now in the UK worrying that Britain is pushing too much money into this war, and we've even heard reports that Rishi Sunak is getting a bit concerned, wants to play it a bit more cautiously in 2023, wants a Goldman Sachs-style dashboard, was the quote, to monitor how this money is being spent, although let's make clear, Number 10 did deny that. Then there are those who say that the only way to beat this, as you say, is to sort of not cave in to the aggressors and to be as magnanimous and generous as possible. Where do you think that line's going to be drawn? Where do you think things are going to settle as we head into the new year?
Well, look, I'm sort of somebody that's pretty cautious about how our tax money is spent on all boards, and I think that actually the amount that the government wastes across the board and across the country when it comes to our public services is huge. But this is an area where I don't think that we should be, scrimping our money. I think that actually when we're thinking about the effect that these aggressors have, Russia is an aggressor, and I think when we look back to, so I know that people don't like to compare it, but we compare this to 1939. This idea behind, this is not our war, not our problem. We shouldn't be spending our taxpayer money to support the Ukrainians. Well, if we said the same thing in 1939, this would be a very, very different situation that we're thinking about across Europe. So actually, I think that, yes, we should be careful about where our taxpayer money is spent, and I think that we should always be cautious about it, but this is not an area where we should be trying to save.
I suppose we really did sort of follow that pathway in 2014. When Crimea was annexed by Vladimir Putin, we said, OK, we're very angry, but no further. I think we put in some sanctions that now, by comparison, don't really seem like we did anything at all. And of course, a few years later, he came back for more. This is what these guys do.
Exactly, and it sets that precedent. We've essentially already set that precedent that the West won't do anything to support the Ukrainians, or indeed support any country that is invaded by another sovereign nation. I think it's awful. I think that what we need to do is put our foot down as part of this Western sort of force for good or force for democracy. Essentially, we've allowed an aggressor to invade a sovereign nation, and we've said, it doesn't matter.
And of course, Danny, you've been living in Russia. You know what the situation is like on the ground. Do you think the West as a whole is doing enough? I mean, Britain's been a leader in this from the very beginning, but have our European neighbours been pulling their weight properly?
European neighbours? What do you mean pulling their weight?
Pulling their weight in the fight back against Russia.
In terms of monetary
help,
funding, they've been funneling money into Ukraine. I think
Germany only sent helmets when we were sending.
And it took 3 months to get
missiles.
The helmets there.
They've come under a huge amount of scrutiny. I mean, the French government has only sent a fraction of the amount of cash that the British.
I mean, there's the argument that if you stop funding Ukraine, then it would cease to exist. Whereas if we stop funding, or if Russia stops its aggression, then there would be no war. I was in the Russian Foreign Ministry this January, and I asked Sergei Lavrov, I said everything that, this was Anthony Blinken's words, I put to him, I said, everything that Vladimir Putin has done over the past couple of years has gone against everything that he's been working for that time, of course, peace and better ties with the West. He sort of laughed it off as a great Anglo-Saxon way with words. Anglo-Saxons is what they call people who are from the West, or white people from the West, basically. But it turned out that it was true. A month later, they invaded Ukraine. And that led to me resigning from the state propaganda machine, which was RT, because I was stood on Red Square just before Olaf Scholz came into into the Kremlin, flew in on Red Square, and around about half an hour before he got there, Russia withdrew troops from the border as a great theatrical sort of show that they were working towards peace. And it's not what they were doing. 9 days later, they invaded. I think now, as we said, we can't take what they say at face value, because there are things like this that are there to sweep the carpet from under you.
What made that decision for you? That's a big step, to resign from your employer, resign from the state's propaganda machine.
Mm-hmm.
You're living in Russia at the time. Mm-hmm. That's a big decision.
It wasn't as big a decision as you think. I mean, I got into the industry. I went over to Russia to show that Russia was this nuanced post-Soviet space. That there's a lot of good things about Russia. And when I was reporting on the celebrations of New Year's, I've just been talking to you about on Red Square, where people drink a lot of vodka and sort of it's everybody's birthday and every celebratory day that you can imagine rolled into one. Reporting on that stuff's great. Reporting on rocket launches is great. Reporting on some of the great stuff that Russia's doing is fantastic. But when Russia makes a move that shows that it is actually not nuanced and does something that is actually very categorically bad, then I didn't think that my position was tenable, and I left. I mean, if we're talking about negotiations, I completely agree that Russia has been playing this game where they're saying we need to sit down at the table. They did it in Minsk a couple of months after the invasion, and they said, well, the Ukrainian side just isn't sitting down to the negotiating table. There is going to be a big struggle over LNR and DNR, the Donetsk People's Republics and Luhansk People's Republic. I can't see those being given up by Russia without a fight. Crimea, I think Ukraine needs to forget that. But of course, the territorial integrity of Ukraine can't be compromised. That's the Ukrainian side's view.
And of course, they've been quite successful recently in pushing. It doesn't seem like peace talks will come at the moment at which Ukraine is advancing, because if they were happening today, they'd be negotiating from a weaker position than if they were happening in 2 months when they might have won back more land. It seems like Russia would ask for peace talks when they're sort of trying to hold on to what they have. If they risk losing it, it's a tricky position for everyone, no doubt. But I suppose we'll have to see what the new year brings for the war. It's a fast-moving situation. But Reem and Danny, thank you for your thoughts on this issue that actually really does affect us here in the UK, as well as stability and peace across Europe.
And leading into that very neatly, we've got market strategist Mike Ingram here with us too. And of course, as long as this war goes on, our energy bills are going to stay extremely high. According to the latest data, we pay the highest price of consumption in the whole world. How can we see that developing in 2023? Is the situation going to get any better?
Well, Olivia, it's certainly not going to get better anytime soon. I mean, the situation we're in at the moment is even if gas flows, for instance, from Russia stay at their current level, they're still going next year be down something like 50 to 60% on where they were at during 2022 as a whole. And if you look at oil, we know that OPEC is unhappy with oil prices at the moment. There was a speculation they were actually going to further cut production earlier this month. That didn't happen, but it's very much on the table for early next year. And then, of course, you've got the sort of ongoing more structural issues in the UK of a lack of gas storage and just very, very poor decision making over decades in terms of energy policy. So, ultimately, one of the things that might cushion short term is the level of government support, or should I say publicly funded support to UK households. But of course, ultimately, that all has to be paid for in terms of taxation.
Now, a lot of people might be asking, why is it that energy seems more expensive, or at least perhaps heating a home seems more expensive in the United Kingdom than it does in continental Europe? And it's not because there's less government intervention here. In fact, in many ways, there's more government intervention into price stability mechanisms. What is it about sort of the raw nature of things that makes stuff more expensive here than the continent?
You're spot on, Tom. Too much government in many ways. So as I mentioned before, we are suffering from decades of awful policy, poor decision making. So, for instance, we've always known that nuclear should be part of the energy mix for the UK, and yet we haven't built a nuclear power station in the UK since 1995. We use a lot of gas. We let 2/3 of our gas storage closed down in 2017 because the government basically couldn't be bothered to spend a few tens of millions of pounds, which is peanuts now within the context of the conversation we're now having on energy bills, just to maintain that facility. We've got a wholesale energy market which has allowed over 30 energy companies to go bust over the last 18 months. So, you have to be, it takes a certain, talented level of idiocy to have ended up in this sort of situation. I was involved in the privatization of the energy markets in Central Europe in the mid-90s, and it was apparent to me even then that some of these countries which were doing this for the first time had better design policies than we had then. And it hasn't got any worse, and things like net zero have just made the problem worse still.
Well, thank you very, very much, Mike Ingram. It's really great to get the expert opinion on this complicated matter.
Certainly. So many different elements to it as well. That's what's really, really fascinating. But we will be discussing more of this, no doubt, in the weeks and months ahead, as it is not going away as an issue.
But for now, with the end of the year fast approaching, everyone's beginning to think about what the year 2023 could bring them. And we've got world-famous astrologer Marjorie Orr giving her predictions for the year ahead. Don't go away, that's after the break.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prisons? I don't believe in prisons. I'm completely stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents. Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
My name's Tom Harwood, and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Welcome back. Happy Christmas. It's just gone 11:40 on the day after Boxing Day. You're with me, Tom Harwood, and Olivia Utley here on GB News, in for Bev Turner.
Now, New Year's Eve is nearly upon us, and many of us are turning our minds to the year ahead, wondering what 2023 has in store.
Yeah, the last 2 years have been pretty eventful, from COVID to a war in Europe and, of course, the death of our Queen. But will the year ahead bring more doom and gloom? Or could it be a good one, finally, for us all? Well,
we've got top astrologer Marjorie Orr here right now to give us predictions for the year ahead. So, Marjorie, what's in store for us?
Well, what you want me to tell you is it's going to calm down and everyone's going to be happy and it's sunshine and roses, and it isn't, I'm afraid. There are good things coming up, but we are in quite a long period of planetary shift, and it's a bit like tectonic plates moving, and you have to stay adaptable. I think this is the year for counting your blessings, being resilient, and looking to see what's good. Now, the good things are that Jupiter is in Aries for the first 5 months, which is upbeat, adventurous, very much a kind of go-to energy. So that will keep everybody afloat. Somebody who knows sport better than me might tell me, because the UK is in for some very good news about February and March. And that usually is a sporting victory. And it's amazing how in the middle of the world falling about your ears, if people win something or their teams do, then everything feels better. Jupiter then moves into Taurus May for the rest of the year, which is indulgent. So there will be a little bit of extra to allow people to enjoy themselves. But there's always a huge but. Pluto is moving into Aquarius in late March. Pluto hasn't moved for 16 years. Think back to 2008. Arg. It moved into Capricorn, sign of money, the financial markets, and governments, and the great crunch happened. Pluto moves into Aquarius, hasn't been there for 250 years, which is a better energy because it's inventive, it's scientific, it's high tech, and it's more dispassionate, it's more detached.
I thought we'd no longer considered Pluto to be a planet. Does it still count in astrology? Because Pluto's not considered to be a planet anymore, but it still counts in astrology.
Oh, yes, you don't listen to astronomers. They don't like astrology. They make things up as a joke. We've still got Pluto. It's still around. It is having an effect, believe you me. Pluto going into Aquarius can be quite enlightening, and it might help calm down some of the mush that's been around. There's been a lot of, as you well know, irrational beliefs, which there is no way that rational argument can shift. People dig in. Pluto moves into Aquarius and says, nonsense, you've got to look at this from a more sensible standpoint. So it will be useful for that. America broke away from the UK, from England, the last time Pluto was in Aquarius. So it is part of a great shift in history, as it were. There was a French Revolution, which came 20 years later. And if you remember back your history to that period, it was a time of a ferment of ideas. And I was very interested in what you were saying about the Tory party and government, and whether or not we're actually about to move into a different form of government, which is very Pluto in Aquarius, and not have the old two-party ding-dong kind of system. So there are some really interesting things coming up, but it will require resilience, resourcefulness, and straighten your spine.
Well, moving on from what's in store for the world, I'd like to know what's in store for me. I've heard that you can predict my future.
Well, which sign are you?
I am October. Libra?
Libra. Yes. Lovely sign. My ascendant sign is Libra. Libras, well, Jupiter in Aries getting on very well with relationships, which is not only close partnerships, but also out in the world. Until May, and then more money coming in. May to early next year, lots more money and positive changes.
This sounds fantastic. Thank you very much. Better future
but
for me than for the
there will be hard
world.
work. You're not going to avoid that.
Pity.
Now I'm a Virgo. I'm at the end of August. So that's what does that mean for me?
Well, I'm Virgo, so we're nicer to Virgos. We are nitpicky, it would have to be said, and critical, but good at staying practical. Now, where we are with Virgo is moving into a period of more success. Jupiter in Taurus from May onwards, expansive. You're going to be talking more, communicating on more,
even more.
And the year after, even more successful. So not all wonderful. You'll be more serious. The one thing I didn't say early on, Saturn moves into Pisces in March for the rest of the year, and that will affect Virgos in particularly. Saturn is the planet of pragmatism. Get your feet on the floor, look to see how things are sorting themselves out, and be resolute about making it happen. One thing out in society, Saturn and
just to
Pisces
get
will
this
do
in, you did
is
mention
help
earlier. You did mention earlier that astronomers don't particularly like the work of astrologers. Perhaps it's because the words are too similar and people get confused. But what is the sort of thinking behind why you believe the position of various celestial bodies actually affects things for the lives of human beings on planet Earth? What's the thought process there?
Well, I grew up in a very scientific academic family. I would have thought it was absolute tosh until someone read my chart and I thought, ooh, and it knew about the past. It wasn't so much, I wasn't that interested in what was coming up. So I thought this is worth learning. And I was a journalist in those days. And journalists, as you well know, pick up things very fast and usually drop them just as fast. But it stuck because it actually made sense. There is no explanation for it, and it's difficult to learn an area where you've got no rational beliefs to fall back on. I always say, and I hate to be sexist, it's easier for women because I don't understand computers, I don't understand electricity or telephones, but I know how to use them. And I've always approached astrology the same way. It has its limitations. It won't make your decisions for you. But the fact that it gives you the broad context of what's happening is absolutely fascinating. And I could bore you rigid with my idea of kind of why I think it might work, but nobody actually knows why it works. So, and the trouble is scientists and astronomers have these sort of A-form boxed in minds. And they can't think outside it because they ruin their reputation if they do. So they just keep believing what they've been taught. And where astronomy parted company from astrology, which was Galileo and after, because Galileo, all the early astronomers were astrologers, as all the early doctors.
And then we realised that the Earth goes around the sun rather than vice versa.
Sorry?
Until the point at which we realised that the Earth went around the sun rather than vice versa, and there are lots of different debates and discussions over that.
That doesn't make any difference in astrology. I think it's too complicated to explain how the astrology actually works. But if I can really irritate the physicists, I do think it possibly fits into David Bohm's, the physicist theory of the implicate universe unfolding into the explicate universe, and you don't want to know about that. But I do think there will be an explanation in there somewhere.
Well, I was feeling like a bit of a skeptic, Marjorie, but if I'm heading for lots more money and lots more success in 2023, then I think you've got me converted. Thank you so much for that. That's a fascinating look to the year ahead.
It's always such a fun thing to do, to go through this stuff. Yeah, Marjorie, thank you.
Thank you.
It's always so interesting to go through that sort of stuff because, of course, there's ways of writing things that sort of everyone affects to. My favourite anecdote about it, you know Jacqueline Wilson, the children's author?
Oh, yeah, I loved her.
Well, she ran a magazine, I think, called Jackie. And there was she used to just make up the horoscopes all the time. People would write in saying, "Oh, wow, that really affected me." And it's like, yeah, no, it's a fun game, I think.
It is.
Well, moving on, it's been a year of great highs and tragic lows for the Windsor family, of course. This morning, we're looking back at a royal year instead of dwelling on the Queen's passing, we're remembering the high of the Platinum Jubilee.
In June, the nation came together to celebrate the 70-year reign of Britain's longest-serving monarch. Queen Elizabeth II herself appeared on the Buckingham Palace balcony in front of cheering crowds with her family.
It was a British tradition on the global stage. Now our royal reporter, Cameron Walker, looks back at that Platinum Jubilee weekend.
A jubilant weekend of pomp and pageantry. The eyes of the world were on Great Britain as we celebrated Queen Elizabeth II's 70 years of service. Trooping the colour marked the official birthday of the late Queen. Over 1,400 soldiers, 200 horses and 400 musicians came together for a magnificent display of military precision, horsemanship and fanfare. The streets were packed with crowds.
For us all to be together, for us all to be celebrating, not just the Queen, but life, our lives, our being together again, was, I think, something very, very special.
The Queen appeared on the Buckingham Palace balcony twice that day. Firstly with her cousin, the Duke of Kent, to watch the parade. Secondly, to watch the RAF fly past with working members of the royal family and their children. Mobility problems meant Her late Majesty chose not to take the salute at Horse Guards. Her son Charles took it on her behalf. That didn't stop the crowds erupting in applause when the Queen waved at them from the balcony. Only the roar of aircraft drowned them out, much to Prince Louis's horror. Queen Elizabeth helped light the principal Jubilee beacon, heralding the start of celebrations throughout her beloved Commonwealth. With the touch of her hand, an illuminated globe sent a river of light from Windsor Castle to Buckingham Palace, where Prince William watched the Tree of Trees sculpture bathe in light. The Queen was absent from her service of Thanksgiving at St Paul's Cathedral, where the Duke and Duchess of Sussex made their only official appearance of the weekend. There were cheers from the crowd when Harry and Meghan arrived, accompanied by a smattering of boos. The Queen also missed the derby at Epsom Downs, instead opting to view it on TV from Windsor Castle, where she was sent a souvenir race card to follow the action. It was understood the decision was taken for her comfort.
There was no guarantee we actually would have seen her. I know on the build-up to it, it was very much on the day to see how she was feeling. It will be memories, I'm sure, which will last all of our lifetimes. We've never seen anything like that. And I'm sure actually we'll never see anything like that again.
Street parties and Jubilee lunches were the talk of many towns across the UK. But perhaps the most memorable was the Platinum Party at the Palace. A star-studded event in front of spectators chosen in a lottery were treated to a surprise appearance from Her late Majesty alongside Paddington Bear. "Thank you, ma'am, for everything," Paddington said at the end of the sketch. Despite a little tantrum from a young prince, crowds cheered for the pageant celebrating different decades of Her late Majesty's reign. The weekend was rounded off by one final appearance on the balcony from Queen Elizabeth II with her close family. 4 generations and 3 future kings. In a message of thanks, the Queen said she remained committed to serving the nation, a promise she kept for the rest of her life. Cameron Walker, GB News.
Well, thanks to Cameron for that. We've come to the end of the show again now. It's flown by. I'm just thinking back to that Jubilee weekend. It felt like the country sort of came together. There was even... Sometimes it feels like royal occasions are sort of a bit, you know, a bit stuffy, sort of maybe older generations get involved. On social media, the term platty-jubes for Platinum Jubilee was trending. Platty-jubes.
It was. I was in Northern Ireland for the occasion, and you might have thought that might be tensions might rear their heads during the Platinum Jubilee, but it was lovely. Everyone was happy and enjoying a garden party. I
think it's something that monarchy does in a way that almost no other sort of thing can do for a country, because it's by its nature, it's not political.
Absolutely, and I think that King Charles has got his head in the game, looking for a good year ahead, I reckon.
And a happy coronation. I'm very excited for that. Well, that's it for us. Coming up next, it's Mark Longhurst. I've been Tom Harwood.
Olivia Utley.
And Bev Turner will be back in this seat tomorrow.
Looking ahead to today's weather, and the UK is looking chilly for some, though rain and cloud will spread eastwards this morning. Let's take a look at the details for you. Across southwest England, a band of rain and strong winds will spread eastwards this morning with some heavy spells of rain at times. Coastal gales are likely across northern Cornwall and Devon. A mostly dry morning for London and the southeast, though there may be an odd shower for the English Channel coasts and becoming increasingly cloudy. A band of rain will affect southern Wales through this morning with some heavy bursts at times, strong winds too, with coastal gales possible. Looking across the Midlands this morning, it will be dry but cloudy in the east. Across the